Parent Entrepreneur Power, conversation number 228.
Parent Entrepreneur Power.
Wait, what? It's Mama Power!
This is the podcast for parents juggling the tough choices required for success in business while putting family first. Hi, I'm Mary Catherine Johnson, and I share the ups and downs and dirty truths of profits and potty training while chatting with successful parent entrepreneurs from all walks of life. Are you powered up? Hey there, Power Parents. You know who I am, Mary Catherine Johnson, and welcome to Parent Entrepreneur Power. I know this is going to be your power hour or a little bit less. We're going to pack in way more than an hour's worth of value into whatever time frame we're going to chat with this gentleman because I am so excited. I've finally been able to get him on the show. I've been stalking him online. I finally stalked him at a conference recently so that kind of he had no choice but to kind of come on my show. So, but I think he's going to have fun too. Welcome to the conversation, Mr. Tom Schwab. He is the Chief Evangelist Officer of Interview Valet. Hey there, Tom. How you doing?
Mary, I am thrilled to be here, and you've had so many of our clients, my friends on. I am just honored when I saw you there in San Diego and you asked me to be on the show. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, I know. I have had so many. Your whole system is so well organized. It is so good. Your people, when they contact me, they know my requirements. They know what I'm looking for, and they only provide really amazing people. So I have to commend you for that. The system you have set up and the people you have running it for you are doing a very good job. So thank you from a podcaster.
Thank you. And we strive to make it easy for the host to say yes to an Interview Valet guest. But I've got to admit, talking to you now and talking to you live in San Diego was a little bit weird because I'm used to listening to the podcast at 1.5 times speed as I run at half speed. So your voice just sounds different.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I don't usually have such a wonderful microphone to be able to bring out the dulcet tones when I'm meeting people in person either. So, all right. So I can't wait to dive into your story. I can't wait to find out more about your entrepreneurial journey because I know a couple of people that we know together are how I kind of got introduced to you, like Aaron Walker, for instance. But tell me, okay, we always start with your once upon a time story. So tell me, how did you get into this whole parenting and entrepreneur gig at the same time?
Well, the thing is that, I knew from an early age that you should never do that. Well, at least that I was taught. And so, the whole idea was to get a solid job. So I was in the Navy, had the opportunity to go to the Naval Academy. And when I left the Navy after 5 years, my dad called me a fool. He's like, you've got to stay in a steady job. Mm-hmm. And then I went into corporate America and I took a straight commission job. And then he called me a dang fool, or words to that effect.
Yes, something similar.
And, yeah, I think if I would have, I don't know what he would have said if I would have told him, hey, I'm going to become an entrepreneur at that point. But it came on later on in life, and he had passed away before I started my entrepreneurial journey. But before he passed away, he said that was the best move you ever made, and I look at that as really that's when I started my entrepreneurial journey. My kids were more, they were both in junior high at that point. But I looked at it as the true job security is what my dad really wanted for me and my family. Came from serving lots of customers and serving them directly, not just serving one customer that was the Navy or corporate America. And that was where the job security came from. So I sort of say the entrepreneurial journey started when I went straight commission. If I didn't kill it, I didn't eat. But then that gave me the confidence to go in and start my own distributorship. And once again, I guess all entrepreneurs are on straight commission.
Yes, we are. I have to tell you, that's a great way to think about it. I didn't really even think about it in the sense that our customer was our boss in corporate America. And that's kind of what you just alluded to, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, even like in the military, I was in there I'm old. I was there during the when peace broke out, right, in 1992, when the evil empire, the Soviet Union collapsed, and there was
Yeah.
all kinds of cutbacks in the military. And even today, there's the same thing there. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times it can be a very steady industry that just things change and people are doing a great job, but the career path doesn't look the same there.
Right.
And so it's not very secure when you've got one customer.
Oh yeah, that is such a great way to look at it. I love that, and I just interviewed actually my oldest son yesterday, and he was talking about that between stability and feeling secure with a quote job, real job is what he looks at it as, because all of his friends are going to college for a quote real job, and he is going to college as well. For something he enjoys, but he also is an entrepreneur at the same time. So looking at that and realizing really where is your security when you have more control and freedom, or when you have to rely on others for that security. So I love putting it that way. That's an amazing way. I'm gonna have to share that with him. So take me through that then. So you did the Navy, then you did corporate America and 100% commission. So I'm assuming you were selling a widget of some kind.
Yeah, I was selling medical devices, so artificial knees and hips and shoulders, all the metal implants there when your bones wear out, and was doing that. Then actually had a distributorship where I was selling, my team was selling those devices to the hospitals and to the doctors. And about 2008, when Michigan led the country into the Great Recession, the manufacturers even said, hey, it'd make more sense if we cut out the middleman and went direct. And, from a business standpoint, I'm like, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then I looked in the mirror and I'm like, wow, the middleman looks like me. And once again, I didn't have one customer, but I had one manufacturer.
Right.
So from that standpoint, they did the right thing. I bought the distributorship back, but then I had the opportunity. We had a sideline business that was direct to patient durable medical equipment. And we were just selling it and renting it in the state of Michigan. And I looked at that and said, wow, there's an opportunity to really grow this. And with that, with the Great Recession, it's like, man, I don't want to start an entire brick and mortar sales force with this. So I had read a book by two smart guys out of MIT called Inbound Marketing. And Dharmesh Saw and Brian Halligan later went on to start a company called HubSpot, which is now, I think it's got like a market cap of about $6 billion. And so we were one of their early e-commerce users and case studies. It was us, and then Beretta USA was one of their other case studies, and really learned that the rules had changed. The people were using the internet to find answers, and the best way to connect with them, to grow a business, was to be the one that gave them the answers, to get the know, like, and trust. Years later, Rand Fishkin, who runs a company called Moz, I actually founded the company, said it perfectly. He said the best way to sell something today is not to sell anything, but to learn or to earn the awareness, respect, and trust of those who might buy.
Yes.
And so really that's what content marketing was. And we built that business up from a regional player to a national leader, sold it off. And then during my sabbatical phase, I was starting to help some other people. And one of the things I realized is that, blogs weren't working nearly as well as they used to, and that podcasts were taking off. And one of the things that I hypothesized was, could you use targeted podcast interviews almost like we used to use guest blogging? So instead of me writing a blog on my site and have it seen by just a handful of people, well, could I put it up on, Huffington Post or Wall Street Journal, get that know, like, and trust? And so we started to do that with clients like our mutual friend Aaron Walker there, and was just amazed how well that converted. And at first I thought, it's a personality or it's a niche. And the more I tested it, it's like, no, it's a real system. It works. And so we taught it for a while. We refined the process, and our clients told us, hey, I don't want to, I understand it, but I don't want to do it. I want to be the guest. The best copywriting, if you want a copywriting secret, Don't write your own copy. Just listen to your customers. They've got better copy.
Yes.
And they came to us and said, the reason we work with you is because Sinatra only sang. And I'm like, okay, what's that mean? And they're like, no, I want to be the guest and you take care of all the rest. And that's what I love.
Right.
And so really that's the point we started to test that. And in early 2016, we launched Interview Valet, which is really a done-for-you podcast interview marketing service that works with coaches, authors, speakers, software service companies in order to get them in front of their ideal customers so they can get that know, like, and trust and really move people from being passive listeners to active visitors and ultimately engaged leads and customers.
Yes, 100% agree. And I have to tell you that being on podcasts, and especially when you land the right podcast as a guest that really does have your audience, the ear of your audience, that and you just go on and be yourself and do what you do and talk about what you love, it can make a huge difference. I know Aaron Walker, he's basically was just on tons and tons and tons of podcasts, and obviously getting yourself out there and being out there everywhere is definitely a benefit. But even if you're just on 1 or 2 or 5 of the podcasts that really have your audience, that can make a huge shift for your business. So tell me let's talk about how you actually grew Interview Valet, because your client is the podcast guest, right?
Correct. We've got really 2 sides of it. We've got the podcast host that we serve, and we couldn't do it without them. But the one that we actually represent, that the monetization comes from, is the podcast guest. We looked at it and said, yeah, you could charge both sides of it, but there's a conflict of interest that could come up there.
Right.
So while we serve the host, we work for the guest.
Right. And it's basically a matching service almost, really.
It is. And, there's some of it that comes from the matching service, right? So there's that booking aspect of it. But one of the things we realized, and you just said that, is that it's finding the right podcast. And then even then we had a lot of people that said, well, I don't want to do all these other things. I don't want to prepare for it. I don't want to promote it on social media. I don't want to do custom welcome pages. And they weren't seeing the same results with it. And so we've really put together a recipe, and we really look at it as podcast interview marketing. And our focus is always on return on investment. It's not just about, getting publicity or an ego stroke that, I was on a podcast.
Right.
No, this is marketing. And if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.
Yes, that's a good one. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. CENTS or CNSE?
I'm not good at spelling. You figure it out.
That was good. So, one of the things that I love, because there are other services similar to yours out there, but one of the things I really love about your service that I think sets you apart, and that is that marketing strategy. That is the part I see myself tagged when you share the podcast when one of your guests or one of your clients has been on my show. And I see on Twitter, all of a sudden I go through my Twitter feed of people who've mentioned me, and there you are. And it has my podcast logo, and it has the picture of the guest. And so you're promoting. So that's another reason, that's another way that you provide added value, not just to your guest, obviously to the person that is in the interview, but also to the podcast onto which you promoted them and got them. And that's just an added value that makes me go, oh, Interview Valet cares about me too. It's not just them selling to their client and they just want to get them on my show and then they don't care about it. They really do promote me too. And so there's an added value there for me as the host to say yes to more. And I've never said no to anyone because I know you're going to provide value for my audience. Your guests will. But that gives an added value that other services don't do.
Yeah, and I always say that it's just a system. Like one of our core values at our company is that our success is proportional to our systems, right? It's not art. It's not magic. You shouldn't have to do heroic feats every time. Just figure it out. It's like nuclear power. Figure it out and just do it reproducibly there.
Right.
It shouldn't be a magic trick every time. So that's how we get the, reproducible results. And like you said, getting booked on a podcast, there's 300,000 podcasts out there. And the barriers to entry to start a booking service are pretty low. If you know of a dozen podcasts, you could introduce some people there and call yourself a booking service.
Right.
We just look at it as that really people don't want to get on podcasts. When somebody comes to me and says, "Can you help me get on podcasts?" I'm like, if you want better answers, you need to ask better questions. And I think what you're asking is, can you help me grow my business getting on podcasts? We can help you do that, but you don't need our help for this. And sometimes you talked about the right audiences there. Sometimes people look and say, I just want to be on big podcasts. There's more fish in the ocean than there are in a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you can find a barrel of fish, go there every time.
Go there, yes.
And if you know that fish live in water, sometimes you might be fishing in a swimming pool if you're on the wrong podcast. So it's all about focus and target. And, we've got a very systematic way that we do it. And, we continually learn from our customers and, from our partners, the podcast hosts.
Yeah, that's amazing. So basically what I hear you saying is you went through this process of becoming an entrepreneur, distributorship, then 2008 hit, and you had to look around and see what else you could do. And podcasting was going, but content management or content marketing from blogs wasn't converting as well, or you weren't getting as much traffic from them. And then you looked at podcasts, and that kind of started a aha moment, so to speak, and got people in that genre of content. And it basically just organically grew into this podcast marketing service that you have now called Interview Valet. So, and you listened to your customers as a way to be much more precise and return a higher ROI to those customers. So how did you, what made you want to actually double down and actually focus just on this? Because I'm sure at the time there were probably other opportunities like your own podcast, so to speak. And everybody way back when podcasting was just starting and EO Fire and JLD hit the scene, everybody was looking at monetizing podcasts and making money that way. So what made you choose this and follow it through and really hone it in as what you wanted to do?
I wish I could say I had this beautiful business plan, and the best piece of fiction I have ever written or read is a 5-year business plan I did probably a decade ago. Every graph was perfect. It went up and to the right. But the business was successful, but it didn't work out the way I had planned. And I always say that I have opinions about my business. I can hire coaches and consultants, and they've got opinions on my business. But the true experts are the customers. And every day they're telling us what they love and what they loathe. And in the Navy, we used to joke, you have to be smart enough to know right answer when told. And I would say the same thing for entrepreneurs. If a customer tells you this doesn't bring us value, we don't like it, stop doing it.
Yeah.
The flip side is if they love what you're doing, if it's profitable, right, they're giving you money for it, that means you should do more of that. And like the example you used before, there were other things that we did for the hosts that people said, it doesn't bring me a whole lot of value. Okay, but promoting it on social media, that brought them value. So it's like, let's do more of that. And let's stop these other things that aren't adding value there. So I think, every entrepreneur can say, I had this grand plan from the beginning. Maybe they're smarter than me. For me, it was I had this direction that I wanted to go. I knew the kind of people that I wanted to serve. And I just kept listening to them and saying, what kind of problems do you have? What can we serve? And in some ways that is listening to them, but then knowing when to say yes and knowing when to say no. I think more and more today, there's a lot of things that are easy to do, but hard to do well. And especially as we got more and more successful and got more and more trust with our clients, they would come to us and say, hey, we love working with you. Can you help us design our website?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, could I? Yes, I'm sure we've got the core competencies, in our team that we could do that, but that's not our zone of genius.
Right.
Let me introduce you to somebody that is their zone of genius.
Yes.
And so from that standpoint, understanding where you want to go with that. And, from that standpoint, I think always doubling down on what our zone of genius is, which is the podcast interview marketing, that has really helped too, because there's always opportunities out there. And as a leader, it's important to say which opportunities align with our mission and where we want to go, our vision, and which ones are just profitable distractions.
Oh my goodness, yes. Okay, Power Parents, you just heard a boatload, to use the Navy analogy, a boatload of genius right there, because Tom I think the book was The Big Leap that you were referring to when you talk about zone of genius, right?
Yeah, Gay Hendricks. There's
Yes.
the zone of competency, zone of greatness, and zone of genius. And you only want to be in your zone of genius.
Yes, as much as you possibly can, and your team. Yeah. So you need to pick up that book if you haven't already. It's an amazing book, and it will make you think very differently about what you do every day. And then just in terms of the whole marketing strategy and the idea of, business plan, that's a wonderful thing. And I did a business plan way back in 2003 when I started my very first business, and haven't touched one again since. So, the whole idea of where you want to go, if you at least have a direction and you start that way, then you can use your compass and you can navigate and change direction with the wind, with the seas, with the whatevers, and go a different direction if you need to, but always staying in your zone of genius. And Tom, just to give you an idea, the reason we call ourselves Power Parents is because if we've gotten kids through potty training, business is nothing. Right? I mean, we can handle business any day of the week.
That's right.
Right? So that's why we already have the power. If we're parents already, just don't worry about all that other little stuff. You've gotten a kid through potty training, you can do business. So you have that confidence to do that. So take the next step, though. So tell me, and we'll talk about the kids in a minute, because we haven't even talked about your kids at all and how where they are and what they're doing. I've just been so enthralled with your whole journey, because especially when you talk about some of the marketing things you've been talking about, what fascinates me is people like yourself who've been in all these other kinds of businesses, but you've gathered those nuggets. Okay, if we want to use some of the terms that we're familiar with now, you've gathered those nuggets and you've just kind of kept them in your pocket. You've gathered those marketing nuggets. You've seen the people around you doing amazing things and creating success. And you pull those out of your pocket and start using them when you build your own business. And it kind of all comes to fruition, right? It kind of all meets in the middle and you go, yes, this finally makes sense. All these little pieces. Is that kind of how it worked for you with Interview Valet as well?
Very much so. And I think the older I get, the more I realize that, everything builds upon something else. Dan Miller, who wrote 48 Days to the Work You Love, he says that every decade your impact should double, right? Because if you're 30, you've got so much more experience than you did when you were 20. And Dan now is in his 70s, and he honestly believes, and I believe too, that the impact that he will have between 70 and 80 will be twice as much as he's had in the first 70 years of his life. And I think that's important, that everything is a training ground for the next thing. So the things that you learned raising a parent, teaching a kid how to drive, all of those things, if you could get through those, you can apply those in some way into a business. And really, I look at, there's nothing new under the sun. It's all an evolution. You say, hey, this worked over here. Let's try this, and move it up from there. And sometimes it can be the great connector, that cross-pollination. Well, this worked in this area. How can I bring it into this new area here?
Right. It's yes, and you're right. We're human beings that have been on this planet for a long time, and everything that we've experienced is has been experienced. All the emotions we have, all the experiences we have, they've all been experienced before. So if we can grow from that and learn from that and kind of get to that whatever next level is, or apply that information faster, or at least observe it to begin with and then look and apply it, it just brings us that much more success. And I just got to say, if Dan Miller actually does double the impact he has in the next decade, he's gonna explode. I mean, he's just gonna I don't know how he's gonna do that. His impact is pretty crazy already, so to double that is gonna be just amazing to watch. I can't wait. So all right, so let's bring your kids in a little bit. So tell me how many you have and how old they are.
Oh, I am blessed to have 4 children, 4 great children. So Samantha she is 29. She will have another birthday soon, so she'll be 29 again, as she says. Ian is 27. Allison is 21, and Emily is 18. So we've got a wide spectrum there. And then we're also blessed with 2 wonderful grandchildren. I used to call them great grandchildren, and my wife got very upset. She's like, "Could you please call them wonderful grandchildren?" Yeah. And I'm like, "Yes, they are wonderful grandchildren, but yes, you are a great grandmother." So,
and she loved that, of course, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
Which is the reason she was trying to get you to stop using that word "great." Okay.
Yes. And I would say that I learned more from my kids than they've ever learned from me.
Oh my gosh, isn't that true?
The questions they ask and the statements they make. I need to be, as a business owner, and as inquisitive as a 3-year-old, my 3-year-old grandchild, that, she's always asking why, why. She just wants to learn. And just the discussions that we have. We had one the other day, and we were blessed to watch the kids on a Saturday. And this little 3-year-old comes up to me and she says, "Mommy and Daddy have to work to make money." And we had this long discussion about it. I said, "No, Mommy and Daddy are at work helping people. And when they help people, they get money." And we talked about the different ways that Mommy and Daddy helps, and Uncle E and Allie and Aunt Emily and all the rest of that. And all of a sudden she understood. And that's how she started talking about that. This is how Mommy and Daddy help people. And from her standpoint, it wasn't so much a job. They weren't going to work. They were going to help people. And I think that's I learned more from having that discussion with her than I think she did.
Yeah. And just in terms of our own mindset, because of the way we were raised and the way we looked at it, even though we say that all the time that we're helping people, and we say that, but until we explain it to a 3-year-old, right? Until we hear it parroted back to us as we go to work, and we have to really believe that we help people. Those aren't just words, really, because our 3-year-old is still saying work. So, obviously we have to change not just what we say, but how we say it and what we believe. I agree with you so much. I've learned more, and especially, all right, you power parents who are still in the little stages, right? The elementary school or younger. What's coming up is you're going to learn even more. And right now I know you're saying, how can that be? I've learned so much from these kids already. But I'll tell you, the number one thing I've learned so far is to never assume where I think my kids are, because they surpass that all the time. And now I keep trying to catch up, right? Because I keep thinking they're still young, right? But they're not. They're 16 and 19, very soon to be 17 and 20. And my 19-year-old is going to move out soon. And I'm just not going to think about that right now. But I look at him and think, oh my gosh, how can he do that? How's he going to support himself? And that's mom talking, because I still think he's 5. Right? I mean, in my mind, obviously, I don't think he's 5, but I still think of him as a teenager. I don't think of him as an adult. I do think of him as an adult, but I don't want him to be there yet. So I want to keep him back. Of course, I'm being funny, but I have to catch up. And when I look at them and the things that they're doing and the way that they're seeing the world and the things they're experiencing and the responsibilities they have and how they're carrying those so well, I have to go, all right, Mary, just chill. They got this covered. It's okay. You can be there if they need help, but don't worry. You're going to worry no matter what, but don't worry about whether or not they can do it. They got this. It's okay.
Very much so.
And that's hard. That's really, really hard. That one transition, potty training, yes, is hard, but I'm telling you, letting them go is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. At least that's where I'm right now. I'm in my exit strategy right now, Tom. So you got any advice for me? Give it.
Enjoy every stage.
Yeah.
This is what you've been working for your entire life, right? To raise children. And I had a discussion with another business owner, and this business, our business now is more of a service-based business. The ones that I did before, or my previous one, was more of a e-commerce business, and that was sort of build the engine and then add the fuel. Mm-hmm. In this business that I'm in now, he said it's more like raising a child. And he was so right. And it's like when you first start out, you've got to do everything. And then, you see them fall down and skin their knee. But there's that excitement of like, okay, the business took its first steps. It learned to ride a bike. And he said, it's wonderful. But he said, just remember that business is going to get to a certain point where the people are going to go, yeah, thanks. Can I have the keys, and could you get out of the driveway so I can get on with my life?
I know.
And he said, for some people that kills them, and they will hold the business back. They will hold the people back on there. And just the same way, when you should celebrate those steps that your children take, even though they break your heart, because
that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point of life, is to create or to help another contributing, compassionate, strong human being to navigate their own lives. It's their life now. It's not mine. It's not centered around me. It's not centered around my home. It is their life. And I say this with sadness and fear and all those things, but I agree 100%. And inside is complete joy and pride and excitement for what they're going to create in their lives. And we have all these amazing ideas, just like in business. We think, oh, this is going to be multi-million-dollar this or this level, or it's going to be published in this magazine, or an entrepreneur, or top, fastest growing, this, that, and the other. And those might be our goals. But there will be other parts that aren't so fun and that maybe we wouldn't want to publicize that will happen. And I know my children will have those situations too, and I will help them through, and they will learn and grow. But I'll tell you, Power Parents, get ready, because this one is the most confusing time when you're having to ask yourself, should I hold on now, or should I just shut my mouth? Most of the time it's shut your mouth. Just let you know. So just keep it shut unless they ask you, what should I do? Then you can open your mouth. But otherwise, don't. This is the time when don't give advice unless it's asked for, because they will not like you if you do. Right?
Yeah, Mary, you just said something there that, reminded me of when we met there in San Diego. And you were saying all these nice things about, me and my company. And I'm like, well, thank you very much. I'm touched by that, but I didn't do all those things. That was the team that we set up and everything. And as you were just talking about that, it reminded me, it's almost like when you go to a parent-teacher conference,
yes,
and they say nice things about your child. Well, yeah, there's every now and then you get called into the principal's office for something that your child did, but there's more often, somebody says something nice about your company or your child, and just that same satisfaction that you get from there. And I find that I need to keep asking more questions, and not of the team, and not and of my adult kids, mm-hmm, and the grandkids. I need to ask more questions, and not judgmental questions.
Right.
What were you thinking?
Right.
Is not a question. That's a judgment.
No. Yes.
But why do you see it that way?
Right.
Because they've got such a different viewpoint on things. And even, a 3-year-old The way they see things is so much different. And a teenager, a child at any age, just to ask them and try to see the world through their eyes, or even same way with an employee. How do you think we should do this? Here's what we're trying to do. What ideas do you have? Because people are creative, and as I think sometimes as business owners, as parents, we become crotchety and in our ways. Authoritarian.
Yeah.
Do it because I said it's the way to do it.
Right.
They've got a better way to do it, and they're both trying to get to the same goals.
That's right. And I agree. And one of the things that reminded me of what you were just saying is that's great to be able to ask those questions, but both children and employees will not feel comfortable enough to answer them truthfully unless you've provided a safe environment for them to do so. So that's probably what you've done. So if I could ask you one question about that, how have you created that team and provided a safe environment through which they can provide answers to those questions truthfully and really feel like they are contributing to the company success by answering?
I think the same way you do it with the child, right? If you ask a question, you've got to listen, not just think of what's my response, and then ask the follow-up question so you understand that. And to have the discussion. And we're not going to implement every idea you have. They don't understand the budgetary constraints on the business side, and they probably don't understand the budgetary constraints on the family side. Going to Disney World this evening when we live in Michigan sounds like a great idea, but there are constraints there that you don't understand. Right. But at least to have that, and I think also being open and asking the questions and letting them know that you value their opinion on that. Like every time we bring on a new client, one of the things that I always wrap up the kickoff call with is, can you do me a favor? For the next 90 days, if you see something that doesn't make sense, could you ask us why we do it? Or if you see a better way to do it, could you give us feedback? Because after 90 days, I said, you're going to be as useless as we are, because we're just going to have a 3-month review, and we're going to go, well, that's the way we always did it.
Yeah. But
they, just to ask those questions and tell them why you value their opinion on it.
Yeah, and then follow through on that. Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So with Interview Valet, you said 2016. So we're coming on 2 years that you've been in business.
Correct.
Okay. So how have you seen the podcast industry change in those 2 years?
It's definitely matured. And also, I think when like NPR came into it, the level of podcasting drastically increased. 2 years ago, when somebody would ask me what I did, I'd start telling them about, podcasts and all of this, and, how we helped people cut through the noise and get in on the conversation. And I'd go on for 3 or 4 minutes, and they'd smile. And then the first question was, what's a podcast? And I'm like, oh, that's okay.
Oh, man.
And but what's ordinary to you is amazing to other people. But now I think, here in 2018, and there's somebody in 2020 listening to this that's laughing right now. But you think about it. There's a show on network television about what's called Alex Inc., about this guy that quits his job and starts a podcast.
Oh,
it's like, wow, there's a television show about podcasting now, and they really make it look great. It's not like Wayne's World, like we're all doing this out of the
our basements,
our basement, our mom's basement. This is legit. So I've seen that. I've seen it more and more where I think podcasting has changed from the standpoint it's more like on-demand radio. A couple of years ago, I asked my 2 youngest daughters, what does the pod stand for in podcasting? And they're like, I don't know, Dad. What's the pod stand for? Because the 2 older ones knew a life with an iPod. The younger ones never knew it. They just knew iPhones and iPads.
Right.
So really, it's not so much a podcast as on-demand radio.
Right.
And, some of it is going to Sirius XM, satellite radio, where it's repurposed content. Other portions are getting put on terrestrial radio. About 2 summers ago, I got a call from a couple buddies that were down in, I think it was Scottsdale, Arizona. And both of them, friends from the Navy and the Naval Academy days, called me up and said, "Hey, I didn't realize you were in town. Let's get together for dinner tonight." And I'm like, "I'm not in town. Why'd you think that?" And they're like, "Well, we heard you on the morning drive this morning, and we just thought you were in town." And when I started to piece it together, it was like an interview that I'd done 4 months earlier that got picked up on terrestrial radio. So to me, that whole idea of what is a podcast is changing so much. You know, if we have the video going and put it up on Facebook, is that a podcast? If we have the video going and put it up on YouTube, is that a podcast? If we take the transcript of this and put it up as a blog, is that a podcast? And I don't know. I just look at it as we just live in an amazing time where we can create the content in the way that's easiest for us and then repurpose it in the way that's easiest for the listener or the reader or the viewer.
That is so true. And now we even bring in my world right now, which is artificial intelligence and that world. And now we have podcasts going on Alexa. On the Alexa briefing, which is a totally different medium. What would you call it? On-demand AI or voice activated AI, on-demand radio. I mean, it's
yes.
The possibilities are really exponential right now. They are growing. And I love the way you said that. There are so many other ways we can repurpose this content. I have my youngest son who wants to be a animator, a computer animator, and he's teaching himself how to do this, and he's playing around in Adobe Audition, I believe. And he figures out that the wave form, that's starting to come out now, where you have on your podcast, you can have the little wave form with the that modulates as your voice modulates.
Yes.
And he created on his own. He took my logo, which is kind of an oval shape, and he put that waveform around my logo, so that it basically. And he also made my logo vibrate and become bigger with the bass sounds.
Wow.
Of the audio of my intro music. And so I've got this waveform that is totally custom for me that is so amazing, because in my intro is one of the people I have on there is one of my previous guests talking to as kids, because I did an episode 100 where I had some of my podcast guests interview their children about how they felt and what they thought of having a parent entrepreneur. It was the funniest thing. And so this little 3-year-old, he gets her to say the name of my show, and she totally mangled it, but she got the word power out, and that logo just bursts onto the screen when she says power, and in the middle of my logo is the word power. So I was just like blown away what my 16-year-old did with waveform in Adobe Audition and my logo. So what's coming is crazy amazing. And so power parents, think about what you're doing. Think about your business and what business you're creating. And even though you're down in the weeds of it and you're day to day serving customers and figuring things out and having difficulties with this, that, and the other thing, put your head up once in a while and take a look at the horizon, because there are things coming that will make your life easier, will make your life better, and will help you help people in a way you never imagined before. So, and looking at what Tom's doing, if you ever want to be on a podcast, if you ever thought about marketing your business in this way and being able to grow your business in this way, I would strongly urge you to go talk to Tom and his team over at Interview Valet, because they have sent me some amazing guests that you have heard on this show. So, well, Tom, is there anything else? So if there might be someone sitting out on the fence right now and they're kind of rocking back and forth and they're going, gosh, probably what they're saying is, I find it difficult to outsource, or I find it difficult to try and find someone to help me in my business. And they're kind of rocking back and forth on that fence, thinking about doing it, but not quite sure. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think as complicated as this world has gotten, as noisy as it's gotten, I think the one thing that everybody has the same problem is that you're obscure, right? We all have something, a product or service that could serve people, that they would gladly give us money for. if they only knew about us. Now, our biggest problem is obscurity. So the question is how are you going to connect with those people? It's not like the days of 50 years ago when your clients or customers were within driving range. Now for most of us, we've got access to millions, hundreds of millions, maybe even a billion clients. So how are you going to go out there and connect with them? I honestly believe you can't break through the noise anymore. You're just adding to it. It's like yelling at your child. Okay, yelling at your teenager when the stereo's on to turn off the stereo. You're adding to the noise. They didn't hear you anyway. You need to find a way to get in on the conversation, and podcasts can be a great way to do that, either as a host or as a guest. If you're listening to a podcast right now, which I know you are, you know the power of this medium. So look at that and say, how could I use this medium to connect and talk directly to my ideal customers? And maybe that's being a podcast host. Maybe that's being a podcast guest. Maybe it's both. But check it out, because for sure that in the future, more and more people are going to be doing it. And they're either going to be listening to you or your competitor. The choice is up to you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry it took us so long to get you on this show. I'm hoping that the next time we have you on won't take so long. And I look forward to seeing you at the next convention, at the next event that we both go to, which I'm sure will probably be Podcast Movement or Podfest or one of those. But thank you, Tom, so much. I'm so glad that I went to that conference and was able to connect with you, and that we were able to meet each other here on the show, and for you to be able to share such great value with the audience. I so appreciate you.
Well, I greatly appreciate it and appreciate everything you do. And, if we can be of any service to anyone that's listening to this, feel free. I know you're listening to a podcast where we make it easy. Just go to interviewvalet.com/PE Power for Parent Entrepreneur Power, and everything Mary Catherine and I talk about will be there. I'll put some resources, the checklist that I use for all my podcast interviews and all of our clients use, the book I wrote. You can buy it on Amazon, but I give it away freely on the book there, or on the website. It's called Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with a Targeted Interview Strategy. And then finally, if any of this resonated with you and say, I'd like to see if this would work for me, feel free to just go back to interviewvalet.com/PE Power. And there's a link to my calendar there, and we can find a time to talk.
Oh, yay. All right, Power Parents, that right there. You are one of the lucky ones that have listened all the way through to the end, because you just got some definite value there, and this will be on the show notes too. So if you're driving right now and you can't remember that name and that link, just go to the show notes, and we will have it right there for you to be able to go straight to that page. Thank you, Tom. That's fantastic. That's wonderful.
My pleasure. I appreciate everything you do. Anybody that says doing a podcast is easy has either never done it or never done it well. And the great ones just make it look easy. So go ahead and leave a rating and review too. Every podcast host appreciates that.
To get powered up for your day, just go to parentepower.com and listen to the over 200 episodes we have so far with amazing entrepreneurs just like you. It might just help you feel like a grown-up again.